WNYC, Context and a Movie. It's where we convene a conversation about a new film with both a movie critic and an expert in the subject matter. This time, we examine the Odyssey, Christopher Nolan's adaptation of Homer's classic epic. The movie is a huge success at the box office. I don't have to tell you. It was the biggest opening weekend of Nolan's career, and it's the biggest opening for a live-action movie all of this year. Here's Matt Damon as Odysseus and Charlize Theron as Calypso from the trailer.
Tell me what you remember.
A wife? A son?
And then what?
We won the war. Help me go home.
We won the war. Help me go home. And listeners, we'll try not to give away too many spoilers about this film, but it is based on a centuries-old epic, and you probably had to read it in high school, so we're not going to be too cautious. But have you seen Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey yet? How many stars or tomatoes or anything else would you give it? Or say anything you want about Homer's original, or ask a question of our guests, Slate film critic Dana Stevens, or Professor Emerita of Classics at the University of Cambridge. Mary Beard is also co-host of the podcast Instant Classics, 212-433, WNYC, 212-433-9692. Dana is also author of the book Cameraman, Buster Keaton, The Dawn of Cinema and the Invention of the 20th Century. And Professor Beard is also the author most recently of Talking Classics, The Shock of the Old. Welcome back, Dana Stevens. Always great to talk. And welcome to WNYC, Mary Beard. It's an honor.
Hello. Great to be with you.
Dana, as the film critic here, what did you think about the movie as a movie? Let's start there. I gather you haven't always been a Christopher Nolan fan.
Yes, I think that this is probably my favorite Christopher Nolan film I've seen, but that comes with the proviso that I've never quite had Nolan fever. He's a filmmaker who I admire without usually being able to emotionally engage with his work. I've always found him somewhat cerebral, and was very surprised to find myself as engaged with his Odyssey as I was. I'm very, very curious to hear what Mary thought of it, because I know some classic scholars have been iffy about it, and it does raise a lot of questions about adaptation and, you know, what it means to modernize a nearly 3,000-year-old poem. But just as a movie, and especially as a big epic, you know, summer romp, an action movie, I think it's very successful, and audiences have really endorsed that by flocking to see it.
Mary, you want to jump in by answering Dana's questions?
Well, I'm really pleased that Dana says that, because I enjoyed it. I really hope people go and see it. And I hope that when they've seen it, when they've seen the film, now go and read the book. That will be absolutely marvelous. And there have been some horribly pedantic, picky classicists around who've been going through this and talking about whether he got the armor right or whatever. And I think that's a bit ignominious, honestly. I think these kind of great books, they're up for adaptation. We should be playing around with them. We should be, in a sense, making them mean something new to us. My question is, and I'm not sure here that Nolan always kind of came out ahead, my question is whether the adaptation loses more than it gains. So I think adaptation is great. That's what great works of literature are for, really, to be adapted. But there's still a test of whether the adaptation adds more than it subtracts. And sometimes it did and sometimes it didn't.
Like how, in each case, if you'd like to go there?
Well, okay. There is one huge episode in the Odyssey is missed out. Now, I can see why you've got to miss things out. You've got to get this, 24-book epic down to 3 hours. And so something's got to go. But what he misses out is an absolutely crucial central bit of where Odysseus is telling the story of what he's been up to at this magical, magical community at the sort of the ends of the world. It's his last stop before he gets home. And what's important about that is that that community has two really key female characters, powerful female characters. It has a queen, and it has this curious but very intriguing princess, Nausicaa, with whom there is a kind of hint in the poem that there's a question. Is Odysseus actually going to stay here with Nausicaa, or is he going to go back to Penelope? Now, in kind of obscuring that, in effacing that, I mean, I think, first of all, we miss quite a lot of we miss a big female role here. We also miss a kind of the wonderful bits of eroticism that Nolan has managed to kind of leave out, really, from the film. And we also miss this wonderfully jokey dialogue here between the princess and Odysseus. And one thing I thought about Nolan's Odyssey is, maybe I just got a very dumb sense of humour, but there weren't any jokes. And the Odyssey is full of irony, wit, and sometimes actual jokes. And all that has gone to become very serious. There's a very moral message of a kind which is super 21st century, but not super Homeric.
That's so interesting that the new version of the ancient classic would thin out the humor rather than just try to get as many laughs as it can because it might be audience friendly. On the first point you brought up, here's a question from a listener I know who describes herself as a Mary Beard superfan.
Oh.
She says, in your book, Women in Power, you cite as one of the earliest and best known recorded examples of the deeply ingrained misogyny in our shared culture when Telemachus tells Penelope to go back upstairs and to let him handle the suitors. And I wonder how you think their dynamic and the gender dynamics in general were handled in the film, this listener asks. Do you have an answer for that superfan?
Well, I thought that they were rather feebly handled, honestly. I mean, I think one of the big themes of the Odyssey is not just Odysseus coming home. That's clearly part of it. But it's how his little son, who he left when he was a baby, Telemachus, how he grows up, how he learns what it is to be a man like his dad. And there is this extraordinary scene at the very beginning of the poem in the Homeric original when Penelope actually says to a bard who's singing a rather sad song about the troubles that all these the heroes of the Trojan War are having when they try to get back home. Penelope says, "Oh, for heaven's sake, put on can you play something a bit more cheerful?" And Telemachus instantly says, "Shut up, Mum." But then he kind of has this absolute message for the future. Speech is man's business. Go upstairs, right? And it's as if somehow, and maybe this is an undercurrent in the film, but how I read that is that for a Homeric Greek man to grow up, what he has to learn to do is shut up, mummy, right? And actually, spotty-faced teenagers, sorry, I shouldn't say that, that's a very English way of putting it, but teenagers in the West have been saying that to their mums for the next almost 3,000 years. It all starts with Telemachus, and with that sense that manhood means silencing women.
So you actually think that the moment where young Telemachus, I'm saying his name wrong, curtly dismisses Penelope for speaking out in public, that helped to establish a precedent for all of Western culture for thousands of years, that public speech and civic authority belong exclusively to men?
That is putting it a bit extreme. I think there are other factors that contributed to it. It isn't just one line of Odysseus's son in this poem, but it's crystallizing that very, very strong notion that you find in throughout a lot of Greek culture, not all of it, but a lot of it, that women are quiet and men speak. And
I have a quick word to say about that in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you, Mary.
No, Dana, please.
It just made me think of, the problem. I think I'm not the only critic to have observed that Christopher Nolan has always had a significant problem writing good female characters or finding things for women to do in his movies that are not purely supportive of the men. And one would think that with a poem like the Odyssey, in which traditionally Penelope is thought of as the waiter, right, who just sits there and waits and weaves. And I actually was impressed, with the exception of with the exception of Calypso, the character played by Charlize Theron. I think there are a lot of great, very strong female characters in this movie that are doing very modern things in an interesting way. I think, in fact, the portion with Samantha Morton as Circe transforming Odysseus' soldiers into pigs is probably the strongest part of the whole movie.
I thought visually it was fantastic, and I don't think I'd ever seen somebody trying to capture on film or in painting of what actually happens when a bloke turns into a pig. A hugely difficult thing to. But Nolan manages, and I think this is one of the great bits. He manages to make this convincing. For me, the problem was that in order to do that, and in kind of slightly recasting Circe, again, he kind of tinkers with these female characters in a way that I think sort of loses something. I mean, essentially, Circe keeps Odysseus, having turned the crew into pigs, she keeps Odysseus as her sex toy until he manages to escape. Now, the whole erotic dimension of Odysseus' relationship with Circe, that had kind of gone. Now, I can see what you gain. I can see she's a much more, actually, and I think unusually for Nolan, she's a much more feminist Circe than you might have expected. But I think throughout, as with Nausicaa, as with Circe, not so much with Calypso, of course, but you are losing the witty undercurrent of subversive eroticism. Is Odysseus really going to go back to Penelope? Does he want to? And, actually, even people in the ancient world wondered that. Sort of wonderful skit on this bit of the Odyssey, where the ghost of Odysseus actually hands to someone else. This is in a 2nd century CE satire, hands to a messenger a piece of paper which is actually Odysseus's letter to Calypso. And what the letter says is, I really made a terrible mistake, darling. I should have stayed with you, not gone back home. So people are having jokes about this.
I could have had eternal life.
Way back, and that's so, and that's the kind of adaptations we get, and we should enjoy them. But they sometimes, for me, don't add. That's all.
Dana, listener writes, overall I was impressed with the scale of production. However, the depiction of Odysseus, Matt Damon, lacked cunning and egotism. Instead, we have a homesick character suffering from PTSD. I guess that leads to a larger question. Dana, why do you think that this film is resonating so much with modern audiences? It's obviously selling tickets like crazy. Is it just the action film blockbuster setting, or something about how the Odysseus, how the Odyssey is, brought into the contemporary context?
I mean, I feel like, I don't know if a classicist will agree with me or not, but I feel like Nolan updates the politics of the story so successfully that, it clearly is ahistorical, right? He is not focused at all on the glory of the Trojan War, which is what the classical poems were focused on primarily. But he's interested in, as you say, the trauma created by war, the idea that the entire war was a mistake. It's really Odysseus's guilt about having come up with the Trojan horse idea, which is the one thing, I guess, that is sort of approaching one of his clever tricks that we see in this adaptation. Something that in the poem is presented entirely positively becomes this enormous source of guilt and trauma and suffering. So there's that anti-war angle, which is absolutely not in the original poem, but which resonates, I think, strongly today. And then there's this sense, there's this idea that there's a civilization in collapse, right? Which is a little bit too clearly, in the too on the nose of a way, really vocalized in the last lines of the movie. The idea that the age of bronze is collapsing, which is a very, very self-conscious thing for a Homeric hero to say.
And
I believe that there's a lot of the rise of the right is there. Is in this movie, sort of in the background, humming in the background as a theme. I believe.
And so, before we run out of time, I do want to bring up this right-wing backlash being led in part by Elon Musk. Musk is making a fuss about the casting of the movie. He denigrated the casting of Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy and supported transphobic posts, I think we can call them, about Elliot Page, as well as posts that claim that Nolan only cast diverse characters to appeal to awards because they give extra points for diversity. He even says he'll make a quote-unquote historically accurate version that will be completely AI-generated with his AI tool Grok. Mary, can we assume by historically accurate he means white?
Well, I assume so. And I just say, bring it on, Mr. Musk, and we'll have a look at what you come up with. Because I've got my doubts about the Nolan version, but I would bet anything that what Grok is going to do is going to be far, far worse. And I just feel, there are issues, I think, in how far you gain from giving it a very, very modern moralizing spin about civilizational collapse. But when you get down to, complaining about the, casting a black actress, Helen of Troy, I just feel like saying, grow up. The Odyssey is a fiction. Helen of Troy did not exist. It is absolutely fine to do what you like with her. And also, by the way, there were people of colour fighting in the Trojan War. King Memnon of Ethiopia, right? This was not an entirely white-only zone. So, just concentrate on what's important and stop, all this clickbait about.
Dana, you wrote about this too.
Yeah, to me, the simple answer of why the right seems to be desperately digging at the bottom of the barrel for reasons to get mad about the Odyssey is that the Odyssey is a successful piece of culture, and the right has not yet managed to produce that. So along with Mary, I dearly hope that Elon Musk goes through with creating his AI Odyssey and puts it in theaters so we can see how many people choose to buy tickets.
As a movie critic, Dana, is your imagination working on, what a Grok-generated version of the Odyssey might be like? Maybe it'll be like the version in The Simpsons where Homer is a character.
He did. I think Elon did post a clip, a little, sample of what he dreamed his Odyssey would be like. And
I didn't see that.
I'm not the first to have said this, but the general observation online was that this essentially resembled a sort of, European co-production, sort of mid-budget 1980s, Sunday afternoon serial. Like there was absolutely nothing original about it, and the only notable thing in it was that all the characters were lily white.
Right.
Well, we will have to leave it there because we're out of time. Dana Stevens, film critic at Slate.com and the author of Cameraman, Buster Keaton, The Dawn of Cinema, and the Invention of the 20th Century, and classicist Dame Mary Beard, Professor Emerita of Classics at the University of Cambridge, Classics editor of the Times Literary Supplement, co-host of the podcast Instant Classics, and the author of many books, including most recently Talking Classics, The Shock of the Old. Mary, thank you so much for talking classics with us. Dana, you too. Always great to have you talk film with us. This was great for me to sit back and listen to the two of you. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.